You know, in the Bible, we have the book of Isaiah saying, "Fear not, I am with you," that God is with us. So do not be afraid. God is with us. We have Jesus walking out to meet the disciples on the water in the midst of the storm, saying, "Fear not, it is I, do not be afraid." Or we look at angels, they appear and they first still the trepidation of the people they're appearing to, saying, "Fear not, don't be afraid." And then we see that the Bible tells us that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Proverbs 1:7, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction." And we see how their either violence in that first chapter or their complacency uh, is the very thing that is like casting a net. It's the very thing that consumes them. It's casting a net and then walking into it themselves. So how do these come together? And I'm thinking, so we to do not be afraid, fear. Do not be afraid, but the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And I imagine you're in some foreign nation where distraught with upheaval and all, some riotous crowds are happening all about you, and you see nearby is the embassy, your embassy of your home country, and you're running to it. They're chasing you, this mob and this frenzy. You get into the embassy, and you immediately feel safe while the rushing mobs halt. And why do they halt? For fear of the guard at the door, fear of the power of the embassy. Now, mixed in with your comfort is the recognition of that this is a power to be feared, that there is an authority here. So that's part of it. That should you be turn enemy to that authority, to that embassy, you could be cast out and be treated like the rest of the mob. So there is fear, but there's also love. There's also appreciation and gratitude and safety. And we could make the same analogy to fire or the ocean, or having a proper respect of things about us, and there's things to appreciate about them too. But the fear of the Lord, right? I think of maybe another way to capture this is I think of Paul when he's writing in, I believe it's Galatians, where he says that if I am striving to please men, I am no longer a bondservant of Christ. That if his fear of men and his longing to please them, if that's the primary, and I know I'm kind of mixing these two ideas, the fear and the pleasing, that if he's fearful of not pleasing them, if his aim is to please men, then he's no longer a bondservant of Christ. So his first, which notice that there, that Christ is juxtaposed with men, so highlighting his divinity, but he's wanting to please Christ. So our Lord should be our first fear, the one that we first want to please, that we run to in the mobs of life, and we find safe haven in a place of respect, gratitude, and love, and enjoying that presence that protects us, living in his midst. Okay, throughout the book of Job, we see this idea of fear all throughout it. We see at the beginning, the angels come and present themselves as the setting is set. And then it says, and Satan came among them too. Someone separate. And it says, where God says to Satan, where have you been? Where have you come from? And he says, from roaming about the earth, and yada, yada, yada. And he says, so have you considered my servant Job? There is no one like him, fearing God and abstaining from evil. And Satan responds, does he fear God for nothing? Does he fear God for nothing? I think that this idea goes through the rest of the book. That Job fears God and turns away from evil, regardless of what happens to him, regardless of having all the answers. And that's emphasized and solidified in him at the end of the book for what he goes through. Does he fear God for nothing? And then we see is later and is not that when his sorry, let me gather my thoughts here. When the comforters were rebuking him, beginning softer at first and then getting harsher, it says, is not the fear of God your confidence? And Job responds, the despairing man should have kindness from his friends so that he does not forsake the fear of the Almighty. And he talks about his state before God, that if I could, I would speak and not fear him, but he is God, and who am I? So he's beginning to waver in the wrong direction here. Then I would not fear him, but that's not where the answer lies to his distress. Speaking of those without when Job's lamenting of the wicked, he says their houses are safe from fear. The rod of God is not on them, and nor is wisdom. Then it comes to this awesome passage in chapter 28, when we talked about before about the mine shaft going down for all the riches, but where is wisdom? He says, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding. Elihu appears and he says, you should have no fear of me. I should not terrify you. And they dialogue, but I don't think a lot of great gain had come from that. Later on, it says, therefore, men fear him. Speaking of God, he does not regard any who are wise of heart, wise in their own eyes. And then God appears and he begins to speak of some of his creation, and he holds up, the ostrich, the horse, the ostrich, the behemoth, the leviathan, and says that of the behemoth, men fear him. He does not regard any the horse. He laughs at fear and is not dismayed, and does not turn back from the sword. And then the behemoth, the mighty fear him, or the leviathan, the mighty would fear them. Nothing on earth is like the leviathan, one made without fear. So here's my point. Fearlessness makes the animal wild. It gives it its wildness, its dangerousness, and it makes the rational evil. So our goal isn't fearlessness. We're not like the ostrich that abandons its young, and we look upon that and see it as cruelty. No fear, so no understanding. Not like the horse rushing headlong into danger without concern. The behemoth, invincible, cannot touch me, so I have no concern. Not like the Leviathan, king of the sons of pride. Not like wicked men who have no fear of the Lord, and so they do whatever they want, and their end's going to be destruction. There is accountability. And we're not like Satan, brazenly going and into God's presence like that. But we should have hearts like Job, fearing God, and so having confidence despite anything else. He is our great embassy in this time, in a world that's goes into turmoil, and we have a great hope before us. So I pray that you may be active in the sharing of your faith, and I'll catch you all in the next video.